Hello and welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books, where we do book reviews of all genres. Today we are doing a book review of a fantasy book called The Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent. This is a fantasy and it's an adult fantasy, although really it probably could be shelved with young adult. There's really nothing inappropriate here that would jump up for that. Okay, its author is Marie Brennan. Okay, so first, the plot. So our story it is intended to be a memoir of a fictional character and her life story. So she's an old woman relating things from her childhood up to the present age of all her adventures trying to learn about dragons. So this takes place in a fictional Victorian age world. So think the 1800s as far as technology goes, but it's not our world. All the countries and the cultures and everything are completely unique, fantastical. And of course there are dragons, a whole bunch of different kinds of dragons. So the world building is pretty amazing in this story because you have all sorts of different levels of culture here. You've got the culture that our main character is in, you've got the culture that they go and visit, there is the dragons and how that changed cultures, the way people interact with them, hunting them or fearing them or ignoring them or whatever it may be, creating myths about them. So our main character is fascinated by dragons from childhood, but she is in a society where that is not really acceptable. A young, proper lady growing up cannot be obsessed about dragons. Even so much as seeing one chained up in a zoo, we'll put that in quotes, is considered not proper behavior for a young lady in proper society. So this is her trying to stretch the bounds of what is proper to be able to do what she just longs to do, craves to do. But this is not a feminist, a book where she is always right or where she breaks the bounds of society and shows them all that they're wrong and becomes Superwoman. That's not what this is. She works within the borders that she is given to be able to do what she wants to do. And that's one of the things that makes this a really interesting book, is how realistic of an 1800s kind of culture that this gets for our protagonist, our young lady. So for example, she wants to go see dragons. Well, she cannot, as she's married, she cannot do something like that without her husband's permission. So she tries to manipulate things so that he goes on an expedition to see dragons. And she was like, I want to live vicariously through you. But when it comes right down to it, she's really upset that he's going to get to go and she is not. And so she basically begs him, please take me with you, and has several arguments on why she should. But if her husband had said no, she would not have been able to go. And part of the arguments he has against this is, one, his job as a husband is to protect her, and going and seeing dragons is not doing that. Going to a miserable other culture, a barbaric, because they consider other cultures barbaric, culture is not doing that. And so is that a good husband to allow her to do that? Whether she wants to or not is kind of irrelevant to that question. Is this good for you? And it's my job to protect you. And so that order of social structure within a marriage and within the society is strongly held up in this. This isn't a case of she wants to do it so she's going to, discard her husband's opinion. No, if he had said no, that would have been the end of it. But he says yes. And again, coming back to that societal thing, is he says when he does this, you realize that this will cause problems in polite society. When we get back, people will gossip about you, or you may not be invited to parties, or you may not be, seen as a proper young woman. And she's like, I don't care. Those are the consequences I will deal with. And throughout the story, a lot of things happen to her that it shows that she is not a superwoman. okay? Something attacks and she does not rescue the party. Something goes wrong and she needs to be rescued. Not always necessarily as a damsel in distress. It doesn't come across quite that way, but more as in, she twisted her ankle and somebody needs to help prop her up as she walks back to camp. Things like that happen. And so it comes across really realistic is what I'm getting at. It's really amazing how realistic the author did this on how a genteel woman would handle being out in the wilds. This also has some interesting effect on how she views other cultures, okay? There is a lot in this book that's so I just dealt a little bit about the sexism, she is a woman and must be protected and everything, but there's also that we are part of a better civilized society than those barbaric peasants over there who obviously are lesser than us. And she treats people like that. Like, she gets to the village where they're going to stay, and the person, a girl, probably not much younger than she is, she's only like 19 in this, and the servant is maybe, 17. And the servant girl, she's like, oh, this must be my lady in waiting, my lady's maid. And she, the first thing she says to it is, I am Isabel Camhurst, you may call me Mrs. Camhurst. And she treats this person as lesser. She really does. She treats this person as a servant, and as a servant, socially inferior to her. And it feels very realistic. It doesn't come across oppressive, so to speak. None of it comes across as oppressive, which is nice. This isn't one of those books where, you feel the weight of the societal oppression in all areas, the class struggle or anything like that. No, that's not really what it is. It's just a realistic way the world worked at that point. I really liked that it was, if this was a historical novel, a historical fiction instead of a fantasy fiction, I would have given it huge kudos for realism in its historical context. Okay, another thing that I liked about this book are the illustrations. Let's see if I can just quickly find one in here. They don't have one every chapter, but they have quite a few. And it's of all sorts of things. So here is a picture of the village. And then at the end, they've got a picture of one of the people. And they've got pictures of dragons and stuff all throughout here. Because our main character is an artist. She is, I guess that's not the person, that's a study. Anyway, our main character is an artist. What she does is she is on this expedition to do the drawings. And so the fact that you have illustrations in here feel like these were Lady Trent's drawings that are published with the book. That is her memoir, which I thought was an excellent touch. I really liked that. The humor is something else I liked in this. Now, this is not a comedy book, but it has a lighthearted touch, touches of humor throughout. For example, when she is proposed to by her husband towards the beginning of the book, he comes and is like, will you marry me, so to speak? And she's like, well, I really like your library. Will you let me read certain books that are not appropriate for women, such as natural histories about dragons? And he's like, you only want me for my library? She's like, well, yeah, but I'm sure you're nice too. It's kind of funny. And so the humor in here is good. It's got a lighthearted tone to it throughout the book for the most part. I liked that there were the main character. So our main character is pretty likable. She's not a people person, really. She's very focused. She's like the quintessential scientist, really focused on her task. She really wants to discover more about dragons. And other considerations can fall by the wayside, including, being polite or, doing the proper thing or whatever. And although that contributes to the humor, but it makes her a likable person that she's not being mean to anybody. She's considerate, but very driven. However, I will say, kind of transitioning to the things I didn't like, This book is plot driven, totally 100% plot driven, not character driven. So although you probably get a fairly good handle on our main character, Lady Trent, Isabel, but you really don't on the side characters. They are cookie cutter silhouettes, even her husband. So, for example, the marriage. It's one chapter, and about half that chapter is her meeting the husband, a little bit of information about, why he might be an appropriate husband for her, his proposal, and then they're married, and that's it. This is not a romance at all. There's no real relationship situation there. Although one of the minor threads through this, I guess I would say, would be her relationship with her husband after they're married. But mostly it's that societal tug of war of what she wants versus what's appropriate versus what he is trying to do for her and how he is protecting, providing, caring for her. That is one of the threads through the story, but it's not a main thing. So even though he is there, you really don't feel like you know him very well. I mean, what is he like? What are his interests in life? What are his goals for the future? You have no idea. He's just there to be her husband as kind of a superficial character. So I will say that's something I didn't necessarily like about this. Other characters besides our main character are flat. Another thing would be there is a little bit of a detached voice to this, especially at the beginning. It actually gets better towards the end. Because this is kind of written like somebody from the, looking back at things, it can be distant, like you're not present with it. Again, coming back to the getting married to this man, it felt almost passive voice or telling instead of showing. Like, there's a little bit too much of that, especially towards the beginning of the book. Again, towards the end, it does get better. The intensity picks up, the involved in the story picks up. One of the things I don't love about the story is that because it is written like an old lady reflecting back, she interjects. It'll be like, you're going along in the story, and then there'll be a parenthesis where she's like, and I tell you all about this in my other book, blah, blah, blah. If you're interested, go read that one. That kind of thing. And it's written to be the fictional character saying that, not the author. But I've never liked books that have those kind of interjections. And they do that, those interjections happen throughout the book, all the way to the end. And I did not love that. So it kind of has a detached voice and addresses the audience in asides that I'm not a fan of that. Overall, however, it was a great book. Kind of unique in its flavor. The plot was interesting. By the time you get to the last fourth of the book, there's quite a few, I wouldn't quite say mysteries, but chaos and confusion that they're trying to unravel. And it has some interesting results on what was going on and why are people or the dragons acting the way they are. You kind of solve that as you go, and that can be very interesting. Her expedition was one that, you go, that was really a fascinating adventure. This is a fantasy adventure story. And I liked that. So overall, liked it. I believe that this is the first of 6 in this series or something like that. So if you read this, there's plenty more, but this one does not end on a cliffhanger. It feels very satisfying to just end where it is. So that's good. So overall, thumbs up. I recommend it if you like fantasy adventure, fairly lighthearted. It's not quite a cozy read, but it kind of borders on that. Okay, part 2 is just what I'm going to do next, and I'm doing a kid's book. Little House on the Prairie. Probably anybody who gets this far in the video and cares has already read this, and I read this as a child, like about 3rd grade, I want to say, maybe 4th grade, and it's now at the point that I want to read it to my kids, so I am going to review it since I'm going to read it anyway, and that'll be my next one. So historical fiction, juvenile fiction, and I hope that you enjoyed this and will join me next time. Thank you for watching.